We're back on The Real News, therealnewsradio.com. We are joined with Adam Kokesh. How you doing today, sir?
Outstanding. Yourself?
Doing good. This is Adam Kokesh with Iraq Veterans Against the War, IVAW.org. To begin, I want to thank you for joining us on The Real News Radio. And if you would, for our listeners, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience as a soldier in Iraq.
Well, come on now. I wasn't a soldier in Iraq. I was in the Marines. I guess that's a pretty good place to start. But yeah, I joined the Marines in '99 at the age of 17 in the delayed entry program. Joined the Reserve so I could go to college full time. Was against the war before the war. Went to that one day a student walkout, at the height of the anti-war movement before the war in 2003. But even then, I was against the war because I was a libertarian. I believed in a foreign policy of non-intervention, and I just didn't think it was going to be worth it. But I bought the general storyline, and I just, because I didn't have a good enough appreciation for the great American tradition of being lied to by our government. So I saw Colin Powell up the UN with his little bottle of nutmeg and whatever it was, and I believed him, and I still was against the war, but afterwards, I thought that what we were doing was cleaning up our mess and responsible foreign policy and genuinely trying to do good by the Iraqi people. So that was something I wanted to be a part of, but really only because I believed the official storyline again. And so I volunteered to go to Iraq in December of '03, ended up deployed to Fallujah from February to September of 2004 with the Marine Corps Civil Affairs team. And, we had the handover of power, so-called, that Paul Bremer engineered on June 28, 2004, and there was really no such handover except in a symbolic sense. The occupation continued. Then, I watched all the events in my area that led up to the second Battle of Fallujah in November, right after the presidential elections, of course. I was pretty heavily involved in the first Battle of Fallujah, being out on the peninsula on the western side with the infantry company that was responsible for the blocking positions over the two bridges over the Euphrates. But we expected there to be some kind of drawdown at that point, a very significant one at least, when we were leaving in September of 2004, and there were just as many troops coming replacing us as we were leaving, and that was kind of disconcerting. But to see that since then we've had 4 or 5 surges has been part of the gradual disillusionment process for me. And then when I got out of the Marines in November 30, 2006, moved to D.C. to get a master's in political management, and I came across the website, Iraq Veterans Against the War, and I was like, well, heck, that's me. I just had to sign up. I didn't know what it meant to be an activist or, a veteran speaking out against the war that was still going on, or an organizer. It was just, I got to be a part of this. I got to have my name on the list. And so I signed up, and it's been an incredible process of exploration for me, but really getting in touch, too, with the whole understory, the reality of what happened in regards to the invasion and occupation of Iraq, to the point where, I would get a sick feeling in my stomach when, I really viscerally felt that, we were lied to, and that I risked my life for nothing, for less than nothing, for lies. And as Alan Greenspan came out and said it himself after resigning his post at the Federal Reserve, the war was largely about oil.
Well, we have seen in this war, we've saw privately contracted soldiers, no-bid contracts. Do you see the war in Iraq as just a tool to generate massive amount of money for corporate profits?
Yes, in a variety of ways, and I think the ones that you mentioned are really the secondary ones compared to, the general expansion of the empire, which is sort of fueled by all of these interests, but the main one still being the oil industry.
Adam, this is Brian. Good morning.
Morning.
Last summer, you gave one of the most inspirational, statesman-like speeches I've ever heard in my entire life, and that includes speeches, of course, by such people as John F. Kennedy.
Well, I'm sorry. I was trying to foster resistance, not be statesman-like.
Well, to us, you're statesman-like. We'd certainly vote for you.
Excellent speech. And it's on our website right now if anyone would like to go there and watch that speech, therealnewsradio.com. You can see the speech we're talking about.
I'd like to go into some of the points you made there in that speech, how you came to the realization that, of course, when you had taken the oath to defend and uphold the Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic, that you came to the realization that most of the enemies we now face are, in fact, domestic in nature.
Amen. Yeah, well, it wasn't hard to see that, the weapons of mass destruction thing was totally fabricated. It was a half-truth of weapons that we had given Saddam Hussein that had, spun out of control, been deliberately spun out of control, as propaganda. So, so who's your real enemy? I mean, right there, it's pretty obvious. You shouldn't be pissed off at the Iraqis. You shouldn't be pissed off at Saddam Hussein even. But Alexis de Tocqueville said it in 1831, in a democracy, a people will get the government they deserve. And history has shown that people, when they demand democracy, they'll get it. When they really, truly rise up and demand it, when a population is ready to assert its rights as individuals in a collective way, representative towards their government, they'll have their democracy. And the thing is, we can't just say, well, we're going to take out your current government and we're going to impose our concept of democracy as opposed to whatever it is that you're ready for. But the people of Iraq, if they're going to tolerate Saddam Hussein, then really that's on them. The criminality of Saddam Hussein being in power as long as he was because, it was a result of us propping him up and giving him weapons and supporting him against Iran. And then we imposed sanctions. And it just shows all the unintended consequences and absolute backwardsness of our foreign policy of interventionism, because when you impose sanctions on a people, that even though they were intended for Saddam, they didn't affect his personal lifestyle one iota, but they were responsible for the deaths of up to 1 million Iraqi children for lack of food and medical supplies. What do you do with sanctions? You make the people weaker. When the people are weaker in a dictatorship, you make the dictator stronger. The best thing we could have done in Iraq, if we really wanted to hurt Saddam, was trade with him freely, because we wouldn't be trading with him as much as the people of Iraq and empowering them, and eventually, who knows, they would have had their own revolution. They would have had eventually, developed to the point where they had the ability, the wherewithal, the organizational capabilities to rise up and demand their own freedoms in whatever way that they were ready for. And that's, the brilliance of the philosophy of liberty and what's really behind it, the, sacred non-aggression principle and the respect of other people. And, as a country, the way we abdicate responsibility to our government, we've strayed from that for so long since our founding. It's disgusting.
We've got about a minute and a half before we go to break, but we have broadcast here that with 1 million dead Iraqis since we invaded Iraq in 2003, we could argue that if Saddam Hussein had lived 10 lifetimes, it'd be hard-pressed that he would have killed more of his own people than we have since we invaded. And isn't there strong evidence that the invasion of Iraq was even planned prior to 9/11?
Well, I don't think it really matters to debate those points so much. I mean, it's worth studying, and you're definitely coming from, or making your conclusion based on totally credible evidence. But, our absurd Department of Defense, as it's called, has plans in the works right now to invade pretty much every corner of the globe. So to say, there was a plan. Well, yeah, I'm not surprised. Of course there was. Our imperialist military is ready to serve its masters at the drop of a hat and wants to be prepared to offer its services anywhere in the world. So, yeah, there were, but what's more important, I think, is the way it happened and the people that drove it before 9/11.
We will be back with Adam Kokesh, Iraq Veterans Against the War, here in just a couple of minutes.